Good afternoon, members of the media and the listening public. Thank you for joining this press conference. I now have the pleasure of introducing the Deputy Premier and Minister of Home Affairs, the Honorable Walter Roban. Minister.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good day to members of the media and the listening public. You will know that climate change is among the most significant challenges impacting countries and governments worldwide. At the forefront of this challenge are discussions on how we can reduce the amount of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. To this end, this government, like many others across the globe, has been working to implement measures to reduce Bermuda's carbon footprint. I am very proud of the work done to reduce the island's carbon footprint and eager to share our progress with the world. To that end, in November, in a matter of weeks, I will be attending the COP26 United Nations Climate Change Conference held in Glasgow, Scotland. Bermuda will be a part of a contingent of overseas territories in attendance, and our involvement with the conference is being facilitated by the United Kingdom government. The overseas territories of the United Kingdom represent 94% of the United Kingdom's marine biodiversity. And we are the fourth largest marine estate in the world. To put it mildly, we small island states push way above our weight and are a significant part of the planet's biodiversity. We are also on the front line of the adverse impacts of climate change. Our presence at this conference is essential to ensure the interests of small island states is not ignored and is factored into the crucial decisions expected to be made to avert the worst impacts over the decades to come. This government understands that our decisions are not about today, are not just about today, but about shaping the best possible future. I know that the decisions made by our leadership particularly impact the youth and those yet to be born. Future generations will inherit the decisions we make. We have seen here in Bermuda and worldwide, children and the young demand a voice to protect the future of our planet. I want Bermuda's young people to know that this government has heard them. On Bermuda's journey to COP26, I want to invite our young students to share their thoughts on climate change with an international audience and with this government. Today, I set a challenge and an invitation to students 18 years of age and younger to submit written pieces of up to 100 words, picture and graphics, or video up to 60 seconds on the following topics: biodiversity, marine environment, land sustainability, climate resilience, or emissions. The winner from each topic will be considered for inclusion in the message that I will take from Bermuda to the COP26 Environment Conference in Glasgow. The deadline for submission is the 22nd of October, 2021. Video entries must be posted to the government's Instagram page with a hashtag Bermuda Climate Change. Hashtag Bermuda Climate Change. Pictures, graphics, and written work must be emailed to submissions@gov.bm. That is submissions@gov.bm. The winner of each topic will be announced on the 26th of October, 2021. I look forward to receiving many creative, thoughtful submissions from our students and the opportunity to share them with the world. The Bermuda government has been doing a significant amount of work to mitigate the long-term impact of climate change on our environment. Although work to raise the level of government environmental protection has been done by successive governments, I want to remind everyone that the Energy White Paper policy of 2011, created by the then PLP government, forms the foundation for our current renewable energy policy and goals to eliminate fossil fuel generation by 2035 and beyond. Also, since 2017, this government has made it a clear policy commitment to enhancing environmental protection on land, sea, and air. Renewable energy and the effort to address renewable energy, which is led by the Ministry of Home Affairs, continues with work that needs to be done to encourage the adoption of solar technologies and energy efficiency by offering, as one of our programs, duty relief for solar thermal technologies and end user duty relief for businesses importing goods that contribute to lowering demand side management. The Bermuda government, as we speak, through the Ministry of Public Works, is installing a considerable amount of PV solar on government real estate. We understand the responsibility we have to show the community to be more efficient and lower costs. Training has also been a focus of our efforts within the renewable energy sector and building a renewable energy industry in Bermuda that is diversified and clean and sustainable. We are creating a new energy industry. And as a country, we must develop a well-trained workforce with the ability to install and maintain the new solar technologies and other renewable technologies. The Level 1 Solar Installer course and the upcoming NCCER training with the Construction Association of Bermuda shows that this government is committed to that objective. In the area of transport, the government is moving forward with the electrification of the government fleet. The Ministry of Transport has ordered electric buses. The charging infrastructure is being installed, and other government vehicles will be replaced with electric options. And I am sure that both the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Public Works will keep the public abreast on their progress with these initiatives. The Ministry of Home Affairs is moving forward with a plan to eliminate single-use plastics. Plastics are recognized as a threat to clean oceans, and plastic pollution poses a risk to human health. The government is currently consulting the community on a phased approach to the elimination of single-use plastics. As of the 1st of September, the public consultation began with a policy paper titled Regulating Single-Use Plastics in Bermuda. It has been available online on the online forum at forum.gov.bm for the public to review the government's direction and proposal towards eliminating single-use plastic and contribute to that solution and give us feedback that will ensure that the solution can be reached. The consultation period ends the 31st of October. So if you have not already reviewed the information or provided your feedback, I do urge you to do so. When it comes to building design and construction, the government also has a vision in mind when it comes to a cleaner, renewable, and safe future. Designing buildings in a sustainable, energy efficient manner is essential to the island reducing its carbon footprint and can save significant costs and bring great benefits to developers and property owners. In light of this, the Department of Planning has put in place planning policies that advise new developments be designed to incorporate energy efficiency measures, water conservation, green building materials, and other sustainable design measures into the building design and site layout. The government is committed to reducing our carbon footprint, and I am extremely excited about the opportunity to engage with Bermuda's young people on the critical issues that I've outlined and ensure that their voice is heard about the future impacts climate change will have on the world. Our young people have emerged as a strong voice in the global environment movement, and they deserve an opportunity to be heard. This is especially true now as leaders of today make the decisions that will impact tomorrow. We look forward to hearing their thoughts, ideas on the topics, and sharing their message with the world leaders in November when we travel to Glasgow, Scotland. Thank you at this time, and I welcome questions from the media.
Thank you, Minister. At this time, we will start questions, bringing in Gary Foster Skelter into the conversation. Just give him a minute to get in. Good afternoon, Gary. You're live. Just test your mic, please.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Gary, you are live.
I am live. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
Yes,
you
we
fine.
can.
Oh, one moment, I'm just losing audio there.
We hear you.
Good. I'm live. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, Gary,
Thank
if you
you.
can actually mute the other source so that there's no.
One moment.
All right, thank you.
Now, so Minister, thank you for taking a moment with us now and for your words there. Now, speaking about reducing our carbon footprint, green energy, alternatives, to people struggling for money and for employment, these are often seen as secondary concerns, in the same way as healthy eating as opposed to consuming quick and cheap processed food. How do you make green living a money-saving experience, not in the long term, but in the short term?
Well, Mrs. Skelton, I don't understand why you're distinguishing the long term from the short term, because in the long term is what we're looking for the benefits from.
But the short term is how
will
we
be the challenge.
Sorry, my apologies.
The short term is where the challenge is with getting people to adopt and understand and get educated and make the changes that we would like to see. And we understand that that's going to be part of the challenge, but we are convinced through the efforts of not only my ministry, but others, whether it be the Ministry of Health, which will focus on nutrition and diet and other aspects of healthy living, and the area that we're focused on is making sure that we have an energy policy that promotes the affordable adoption and transition to clean energy and safer practices when it comes to our marine environment, and certainly practices that ensure clean air. We know that this is, in the short term, will be the work, so that the long term, the benefits come. So I understand that there's going to be work to educate that in a way that we can influence behavior, because that is what needs to be done. And this is not just a local Bermuda problem or challenge. This is a global challenge.
My apologies for interrupting you there. It was the issue of the short term is that people struggling for money and employment, that is where they see things happening. Someone might be living from paycheck to paycheck, so they're not going to be necessarily thinking of what a green energy initiative will be doing 5 years, 10 years down the line. So what kind of when initiatives can be taken, government drives such as cashback for you using your own bags rather than plastic bags, free filtered water for people bringing their own water bottles. What kind of influence can government have in that space?
Well, we have a number of things that we want to do. Already, there is great support by the government with the importation of renewable related technology. One, that is all duty free. If you want to buy, and maybe you don't think this is important to the average Bermudian, but I think this is a part of the process we're trying to build. Right now, if you want to buy a electric car, there's no duty. If you want to buy other equipment related to renewable energy or that brings, or like supporting energy, it is duty free. When it comes to when it comes to food, as you would know, we have already put in place a program to reduce the duty to zero on fruits and vegetables. So those things that bring the greatest amount of, advance in nutrition and health and a healthy environment, we have made steps, and we have more work to do in that area. Obviously, there's a single-use plastics initiative, and we know that there may be persons out there who right now aren't working and are struggling to afford even just to exist within the current environment, and making a choice to change to a renewable one may seem like a costly or belaboring exercise. Well, part of our work will be, and we are already started, is showing people how they can save money by making the small changes. Because many of the changes, Mr. Skelton, aren't big, huge capital investments. They're actually just, instead of purchasing one thing, purchasing another. The price difference may be a little bit something that people see, but in the long term, you save the money that you're trying to keep in your pocket. So there are little things that people can do without having to worry about initially the capital investment, like the solar panels on their roof, or a new water pump, or an electric car, or battery support for their panels. There are little things that people can do to bring about the affordability that can begin their process of becoming a more greener in their habits and in their choices and in their tastes. I would just like to mention, sir, that one of the things that we're doing, we're looking to set up a financing model that will help to support the transition of green energy, that will take much of the cost, the capital costs, away from the average homeowner or average resident. So that process is starting. We certainly will continue to advance people purchasing LED bulbs and making other small changes to their lifestyle that will actually bring about lower costs. You will see soon some information on how people can lower their electricity bills. We know that with the recent announcement of increase due to the fuel rebate, the fuel surcharge, an increase in their electric bill. We're going to provide information that will help people on how they can incrementally lower their power bill on a daily basis. There are things that people can do to do that won't cost them money, but will save them money. So there are a number of things that we will be initiating. As I said earlier, we're actually modeling a fund that will help to invest in the community to support the adoption of solar energy. So there are a number of things that we will be coming up with over the next period that we believe will help to address the issues that you raised.
Yeah. I'd like to return to that a little more detail on that financing model, but I want to go back to something that you and I spoke on in December last year. You said there was a sandbox legislation being created, similar to the legislation Bermuda has for fintech, to enable international investors to experiment with new green technologies in Bermuda. And you also said there was at that time an investor in wave energy technology waiting for that legislation so they could proceed. Can you please tell us what has happened with that project?
Well, more will be seen about that in the next legislative session. All that I told you about in December is still in place. There is still the interest by that potential investor. There is still our work. We're about to complete our work with creating the regulatory sandbox. And so once those steps are finished legislatively, more will happen with the other opportunities to attract that investment of innovative energy projects. So all that is still in place. The legislative process moves in a very sort of steady way. So the work that we've done there is continuing. I am excited about the prospects of getting this finished later this year so that more can be heard by the public about that particular project.
Well, obviously that is 10 months ago when you first talked about that. So do we have any kind of timeline, at least on the legislation, the sandbox legislation?
That legislation I will be bringing forth in the next legislative year, which begins next month.
Gary,
Next
I'm going to give
session.
you one more question.
The next
One more.
session, which will start next month.
Thank you. One more question. Then I'll move on to what you have been saying about single-use plastics, the kind of nature and nuance of that legislation when it comes to you. It's one thing to get rid of plastic cutlery and shopping bags, but what about trash bags? In an environment like Bermuda, trash that's not kept in plastic bags will begin to smell very quickly. Then we've got other nuances for single-use plastics. What are your approach to items such as diapers and things like that? What's your nuance and long-term plan with all these individual items that we have that are single-use plastics?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Skelton. I hope you've taken time to read the actual consultation paper that we have out publicly, which outlines our phased approach to dealing with this. As you've eloquently described, there are different types of plastics, and how we eliminate them from our environment will take a phased approach. That proposal is outlined in the policy paper, which is currently available for everyone to look at and to review and to make their contributions. So I encourage you to look at that, and that will answer a number of your questions. And my team that is involved with this, I believe, will be doing another press event very soon. And I hope you take the opportunity to ask them some of the details around those steps. But you have described why this is a phased approach. There are different types of plastics with different type of usages that we must take steps to eliminate so that the transition can be made by the community in a sort of reasonable way.
Well,
right,
thank you, Minister.
Gary.
Thank you.
All right, I'm now going to bring on Jonathan Bow from the Roy Gazette. Good afternoon, Jonathan. Can we just have a mic check?
Good afternoon, sir. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You are live. You can proceed with your question.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you,
Afternoon,
Mike.
Jonathan.
Good afternoon, Minister. Good afternoon. I'll begin with the electric buses that you mentioned. I know you referenced transport as well. That's where that goes. When realistically might we be seeing electric buses? 2 years, 4 years? What's the discussion at this point on electric buses?
Well, I just wanted to remind people that they have been ordered, and I believe that the Minister of Transport has spoken quite a bit of detail on that, and I would encourage you to go back to him to find out the more in-depth detail as to the timeline. I do know those buses have been ordered, and they are on their way to Bermuda and should be here, begin to get here, because it's about 30 of them shortly. But any further details on that really should be shared by the Minister of Transport. But I mention it as all, whether it be the electrification of government transport in particular, has been a part of our energy policy that we have carefully outlined that we're seeking to achieve. So we look forward to seeing those buses beginning to arrive. As I said in my statement, the infrastructure is also being put in place. In fact, if you go down to the government parking lot today on Reed Street, you'll see charging stations there. So the reality is that we are getting ready to have electrification not only of our bus fleet, but also of other aspects of the government fleet.
Good to hear. I noticed Gary was curious about this as well. I too we've talked about this, about the sheer amount of money that leaves Bermuda that we spend on fossil fuels, especially for electricity. You referenced the financial model. I know that I've seen there's businesses out there that are offering the ability to get solar paneling without putting money down, for example. Just given the figure escapes me, but just given forgetting carbon, but the amount of money that leaves Bermuda spent on fossil fuels. Can you tell us about what kind of financing model is going to be in place to really push on the solar aspects so we can start saving there?
Well, I think I can recall the figure. It's in the hundreds of millions of dollars, over $100 million that we export in foreign exchange to pay for fossil fuel. That is both the fuel that powers the utility, but also in petrol and other forms of fossil fuel that power transport. So it is a significant amount of spend, and clearly, if some portion or percentage of that money can be kept on island, it certainly will be put towards much more sustainable investment in our community. So we look forward to this transition, which is contemplated in the integrated resource plan, for us to have particularly on the side of generation, 85% of our generation from renewable energy. So by 2035, it is our hope that hundreds of millions of dollars will be shrunk down to a significantly smaller sum. And with the electrification of transport, also very crucial to this reduction in the expenditure. As I believe the Minister of Transport has spoken about, and I think is well known globally, is that the major car production companies are making substantial investments in electrification of vehicles. Europe is going to have essentially no more cars or vehicles produced by internal combustion engines by 2035 or so. So the reality is that we are on a ticking clock with our current existing fleet of government and also private vehicles to make that transition. And with that transition will come lessening of the export of expenditure on foreign oil. As we can see, the price of oil globally is going up. That's well known. So as we in Bermuda experience the shock of that increase, everybody's experiencing it globally. And we need to find ways to remove the constant instability of those prices, thus lowering the cost of living in our environment. And so one of the things that the government is doing, we have legislation that we are currently taking through that will allow a lot more of a regulatory framework on how fuel is priced. We believe that will positively impact the cost that we all pay at the pump and in other ways when it comes to the use of fossil fuel. And so that's just one of the other mechanisms that we're putting in place to not only address long-term the issue of the exchange going out, but also the cost that we all on island have to pay with the instability of fuel as it relates to the international price. So we're going to do our best through legislation to have a much more attention to the costs that we all pay on island for fuel.
Going back to the financing model there, though, can you tell us if there's any discussion on that specific aspect of being able to reduce the money upfront to get this type of technology on my roof, say, by paying for it out of the savings that citizens are going to make? Is that something that your government's looking at?
Well, I can't say that we're looking at that specifically. The main thing that we're trying to address is there are things that bring about the high cost of living in Bermuda.
Yeah.
There are aspects of how fuel is handled, how the cost of fuel and how it's priced in Bermuda, which needs to have a much more careful scrutiny. And we are going to use legislation to address that. This is not unusual. Other parts of the world, there is a regulatory framework in place for how fuel is priced. And we're going to ensure that happens. and we're working with the regulatory authority to have that in place. We believe that this is just one of the ways to help lower the cost, to become more sustainable, and to ensure greater security of our energy supply, is if we don't have as much foreign exchange going off island and finding ways to control the costs that people are exposed to on island. I'd like to also say that one of the things that we're working on to bring down the cost and exposure to the citizens as we make the transition away from fossil fuel is to ensure that through our energy policy and the changes we make legislatively, that we can expand the use of renewable energy that is community-based. We believe that that's one way to ensure that the cost that each person and household pays can be constructively reduced, is if we can have a community-based approach and a more diversified approach with the generation of energy. So those are some of the things that we're going to be working on in the months ahead, changing the legislation to reflect that change that is needed in energy policy, that also addresses the issues that climate change is also bringing upon us. Because part of us mitigating the impacts of climate change is getting more control over the uncontrolled costs that we spend on the very elements that contribute to climate change. We need to reduce our expenditure on fossil fuels and invest in renewable, sustainable generation of energy and cleaner forms of energy that can certainly lower Bermuda's own carbon footprint in this very important area.
You mentioned community-based. What does that mean? Does it mean sort of neighborhoods pitching in together, or what's a community-based model?
Well, it would mean essentially not everybody necessarily having to have a solar panel on their roof. They will be able to tap into a network that is set up and designed for a number of households to tap into, so that they can benefit from the renewable energy that is being produced from a community standpoint. So not everybody should have to make the huge capital investment of solar panels. Mm-hmm. When there's a model that allows them to tap into that form of generation from a utility scale that is being generated somewhere else in the island, maybe on a large commercial roof or at a site that has been designed and set up to generate utility scale solar or renewable energy.
Got it. I can see Mr. Brangman has joined us. Is there time for a couple more questions?
Yes. Yeah. You can have two more questions.
Okay. Just switching over to single-use plastics. Obviously, the consultation is still going on, but retail is stressed at the moment from the sound of things. What are you hearing from retailers about this? What are they saying?
Well, we know that they have questions and they want to know and understand how this transition is going to impact their bottom line and the costs that they are exposed to. And that is the very reason why we've taken time to have the consultation in the way that we have. And I've made a commitment that I am not going to take this proposal forward unless I feel that every voice has been heard and every opportunity for consultation has been completed. And I'm particularly concerned about our retailers and those in the service industry that rely heavily on plastics for their service business, and that whatever transition is made doesn't provide a major adverse risk to their bottom line. I must say that I'm very pleased so far with the feedback, the frankness of the feedback, but I'm also pleased with those who've already made steps already with making certain changes, with providing biodegradable containers, and already having non-plastic straws and non-plastic equipment as a part of their business that they've transitioned from those plastics. So I applaud those who are already making the step. They clearly understand and appreciate the need to reduce the use of single-use plastics. But I also know that it's a harder transition for some others. So that's why we want to work with them. I think everybody accepts that this is an important goal for the island to reach. Many other islands have already put in place mandates against the importation and use of single-use plastics. So we as an island want to make a similar transition in a way that the whole country can be comfortable with. But we still reach the goals that we want to reach with, reducing the amount of that plastic in our environment, which everybody accepts has to happen. Oh, okay. Oh, we see what's happening to our oceans around us. We see what's washed up on our shores. So it's clear that we all have a role to play with taking these steps.
Minister, last one from me, but sometimes we hear this talk of hydration stations. I know City of Hamilton seemed to be looking at really going big on that quite some years ago. Is that something that the government is talking about? Is there any conversation going on about that one that eliminates a lot of the plastic bottles that we see around?
Well, that's something that can be looked at going forward. Obviously, the City of Hamilton did have those sort of stations in the past. I don't know why they have moved away from them or haven't continued them, but perhaps there are issues there that have to be addressed when it comes to the maintenance and overall keeping them working. There are a number of things I think that we can look at. I think really this speaks to a change in behavior of all of us. We have to be prepared ourselves to change how we do things. I think hydration stations strategically put in perhaps parks and around Hamilton will be a good thing, but people, the value in them will be if people use them and feel that they can trust them as stations for clean water and good and healthy nutrition, so that their usage will benefit the community. And I would like to just say, Jonathan, all this is not just for show in the effort just to reach some policy goals. We believe that taking these steps that we've proposed in here, and I'm a little puzzled why none of you have actually asked about the youth campaign that I actually am announcing, that actually I'm trying to include our young people in this discussion. And neither you or Mr. Skelton have asked me any questions about that very important thing. You've asked me about things that you can always talk to others about that I've already put out there. But this is all about inclusion of our community and bringing a healthier, sustainable future to our community. And let me just make sure because I don't know if there's anybody, if there are any other journalists that I'm going to be speaking to at this point, but I want to make sure that I say this is about inclusion of our young people in the conversation and wanting to have their voices heard.
I remember.
This is about ensuring their voices are heard. So I hope that you and Mr. Skelton include that message in your reporting of this press conference, that this is about our young people, including them in the conversation, and making sure that they understand that we appreciate that they will inherit the decisions that I and my colleagues make today. And we want them to be proud of the decisions that they will inherit. So that's my answer there to you in my conclusion.
Got it. Most definitely. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Have a good day. All right, Minister, do you have any closing remarks?
No, yes, I do have a few closing remarks. Just that I do hope that the young people of Bermuda accepts the invitation that I've offered to them to be involved with the conversation, because I want to take as part of the message that Bermuda will take to Glasgow as one that includes their voice, not just a policy voice of myself as an adult who has responsibilities and my other adult colleagues or their parents. I want to make sure that they are heard and they know that I will take their voice as well to Glasgow as part of this global conversation that we have about our climate, our environment, and its future.
Yes, thank you, Minister. Thank you for the public, members of the media, for joining us at this press conference, and we will now come to a close. Have a great day all and be safe.
Thank you.